Hello, my name is Mary Vano. I'm the rector of St. Margaret's Episcopal Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, and this is our Discover Your Spiritual Type class. This class is based on the book Discover Your Spiritual Type by Dr. Corinne Ware. Dr. Ware was one of my own seminary professors, and it is a delight to me to return to her work some 15 years later and to teach it for the benefit of my own parishioners. I'm glad that you're here and participating in this class. Dr. Ware really imagined that her work would be used for two purposes. The first is for individuals. As an individual, you can discover your spiritual type, and when you do that, you'll learn more about how your spirituality differs from others, how you can grow in your spirituality, and how you can best nourish who you are. The other purpose is for the congregation. And for community leaders, this class is a way that we can get to know our community better and therefore serve our community through providing nurturing and nourishing worship practices, and also find those ways that we can grow through offering better worship and more classes, groups, fellowship, and ministry that meets the needs of those in the congregation. So I'm glad that you're participating in this class, and I hope that you'll get a lot from it. The Circle of Sensibility was developed originally by Urban T. Holmes, Dean of the School of Theology at the University of the South from 1973 to 1981. It was expanded upon by Corinne Ware, Professor of Ascetical Theology at the Seminary of the Southwest. The Circle of Sensibility is a way of seeing ourselves spiritually, about naming who we are. First of all, the circle itself represents the value placed on unity and on the interdependence of each part upon the other parts. While we will talk about differences among people, we still must acknowledge the value that each brings to the table. A respectful and creative dialogue among spiritual types promotes the health of the individual and the community. Two intersecting lines divide the circle into quadrants. In a moment, we'll talk about those quadrants, but let's first consider the lines. The vertical axis poses the question of how one goes about knowing, through the activity of the irrational mind or by accessing feelings. So at the north pole of our circle, we see the word speculative. This is the activity of the head, or we could think of it as an intellectual or cognitive spirituality. At the south pole of our circle, we see the word affective, meaning that perception happens through feeling rather than by intellectualizing. This is a heart spirituality. The horizontal axis raises the question of how one conceptualizes the divine. The west pole is labeled apophatic, which we can think of as emptying. It is the tendency of a person to think of God in non-concretized ways, to think of God, in other words, as mystery. On the opposite side of that is cataphatic. This means that one imagines God as real and knowable. To review, the four poles in our circle are speculative, affective, and apophatic, cataphatic. It may be easier to remember the less precise terms of head and heart, mystery, and imaging. The two lines create four quadrants. When we start discovering how people know God and how people conceptualize God, we can then find that individuals will have dominant tendencies in one or more of these four quadrants. The first quadrant, type 1, is an intellectual thinking spirituality that favors what it can see, touch, and vividly imagine. This is the speculative cataphatic group. They will focus on gathering and on the spoken word. What activities might this group ask for to enhance its spiritual life? Their choices will be based mostly on activity and on corporate gathering, more study groups, better sermons, and some kind of theological renewal within the worshiping community. The contribution of type 1 spirituality to the whole is invaluable. The group will support theological reflection and clarity. While type 2 or 3 experiences the holy, Type 1 makes sense of it and names it so that we can have coherent teachings from generation to generation. The second quadrant, Type 2, is the affective cataphatic. Here we're still imagining God in the real life stuff of the world, but the knowing of God is less intellectual and more heartfelt. This is a more affective, charismatic spirituality whose aim is to achieve holiness of life. The transformational goal is personal renewal, and the emphasis will be on sharing this experience with others. Their contribution to the whole is the warmth of feeling, energy, and freedom of expression that others may lack. Type 3 is the affective apophatic quadrant. This is the home of mystic spirituality. In this type, we are still in the affective or feeling experience of God, but we move for the first time into the apophatic concept. Here, hearing from God rather than speaking to God is prominent. The aim of this spirituality is union with the holy, and while this is never completely achievable, only the continued attempt or journey satisfies. People attracted to this type of spirituality are often by nature contemplative, introspective, intuitive, and focused on an inner world that is to them as real as the exterior one. Type 4 is the speculative apophatic quadrant. This is the smallest group of people, and because it is somewhat rare, it is somewhat more difficult to describe. These people combine an intellectual way of knowing with an apophatic way of seeing. These combined qualities make for an active visionary who is single-minded with a deeply focused, almost crusading type of spirituality. These people will care less about an affiliation with organized religion and will focus instead on simply obeying God and witnessing to God's reign. Theirs is a courageous and sturdy idealism that takes responsibility for change. They have a passion for transforming society. Now you know the basic outline of the spiritual types. If you haven't already, now's the time to take your spirituality type quiz. Also, if you want to read more about this, I encourage you to get a copy of the book and read it yourself. The book again is Discover Your Spiritual Type by Dr. Corinne Ware. Next week we will review and discuss more about what all this means for you.